Well, good morning, everyone, and we welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful Sunday morning. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. And we'll begin now with Florence on the Wayside.
Emianum na adofo no mahwanache akwaba.
Oh. Thank you. That's your Canadian reading.
Right. I'm reading from pages 28, 30, and 62. Just little excerpts from Mrs. Eddy on those pages and 62, okay? When we realize the allness of God, that He is life, truth, love, omnipotent, omnipresent, infinite principle, all will be accomplished. Oh, love, give me higher, holier, purer, self-abnegated motives and desires and spiritual inspirations. Pray God to take away my testimony of the lying senses and increase my faith and spiritual sense. Mary Baker Eddy.
Beautiful, thank you. Okay, our watching point.
Watch number 495. Watch that you remember the rule, quote, if you take error seriously, it will take you seriously, unquote. Using against you the very weapon you give it. Error is only a belief, and one receives from it exactly what he puts into it. Let us put into it the realization of its nothingness and the allness of good, as well as the conviction that there is nothing in us to respond to it, to believe in it, or to fear it. Neither can we be made to forget or to neglect the necessity for standing up to it and meeting it under all circumstances. Error cannot be serious unless you make it serious. So keep your grin ahead of your groan. Mrs. Eddy once said, quote, some of you are taking life too seriously. A sense of humor is a saving grace, unquote.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite watching points. So, any comments on that?
Really? Come on. Well, I obviously where it says neither can we be made to forget nor to neglect the necessity for standing up to it. Since coming here again, I've learned to be more instant in doing that. The alertness to duty. That's what we're supposed to do. To not neglect nor to forget or to neglect our duty to God, to our leader, and to mankind. And so it means to stand up to any error immediately and meet it, even from the smallest to the largest circumstances. And definitely learned more how better to do that since coming here.
Good, thank you.
I like the part about not taking errors seriously. It's a challenge for me sometimes, to do that, to apply that. But it's a good reminder.
It is. It is. When you think, oh, yes. I've got this big problem, and it's, then you've set the array. That's why I love what Mrs. Eddy says. You keep your grin ahead of your groan.
Yes.
A good laugh is very wholesome. A merry heart maketh like a medicine. and it's also it's one of those things that breaks the spell of a mesmerism. Laughter, crying, or getting angry. So remember that. And who was it that Norman Cousins or something, he developed this whole, he was, I believe, a doctor, and said if you have a problem, just spend the afternoon watching funny movies and laughing. It's a healing agent.
Well, that is a good thing, because a lot of times that down feeling wants you to watch down things and listen to down things and continue to go down into it.
Mm-hmm. And what does the Bible say? A merry heart is like a medicine. So,
and another thing is that error hates being laughed at.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, it puts it in its place.
Betty's always laughing.
Betty is always. Yep. It's good to laugh. So.
Yeah, my grandmother told me when I was young that no matter how difficult things may seem to be, someday you'll be able to laugh at it, and it has always proven to be true. So. Thank you. Yeah, it is interesting. Sometimes you can look back on your life, and at the time it seemed like some horrible thing was going on, but now you can actually laugh at it. So, yeah, and remember, whatever presents itself, you meet it with, if God didn't give you this power, then you have no power over me at all. It doesn't come from above. You are powerless. And then have a good hearty ha ha ha. So there, take that, error. Hell you say.
That's the one thing that error hates the most, is to be laughed at.
Mm-hmm. All right. Our subject today, probation after death. And go ahead, Lil, with the golden text.
The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death.
Thank you. And then comments on that.
We don't have to give into it. It's an enemy to be destroyed.
Thank you.
Not to be, just gone along with.
Yes.
You mean it's not your friend?
and some people do view it that way, because if their life is so tragic and troublesome, they're looking forward to it in some way. And that is not what Christian Science teaches. It's overcoming, and overcoming now. You don't wait. Now is the accepted time. Now, we do it now. And as we overcome all the suggestions, including sin and sickness, then we are also overcoming this belief of death. But when you go along with the sin and when you go along with the sickness, you are building it up. So meet the claims as they come, day by day. Don't give in to them. And I've given this to you many times, but I love it. It's in Red Book, page 74. Instead of being bound for the grave, we must know we are on the eternal road of life that has no sense of death. I have that pinned in my book. It doesn't even have any sense of death. Picture that road. It's a straight and narrow road, but it's a joyful road. It's where our grin is ahead of our groan, and we overcome instead of submit to problems.
And there are some beliefs that somehow death makes your life better, right? You're going to be better off on the other side, or something, like that. Well, sorry, it's not true.
No, it is not true. So we don't have to have it.
This is Eddie says we have to meet our problems here or hereafter. So ain't going to change.
Well, that's it.
Yep.
And just a simple thing that we were taught here, or I was taught, I probably even in Sunday school. Sorry, I'm usually the one making all the noise with my papers, but anyway, if you've lived the best life you know how, when you pass on, your rewards will be greater. You will first wake up to find out you haven't died, or whatever you thought killed you did not kill you, and that will advance you. It will advance you. I mean, we have a good, loving God. There's nothing to fear, and there's not any. Even my understanding is not any huge change, and we can have heaven here on earth and walk out. And that means, as we've talked about it in past roundtables, about matter without its material accompaniments. That means there will be no sin, disease, and death, but we will still exist as beings. We just won't be matter beings. We'll be spirit, entirely spirit, but we will have form, outline, color. We will know who's who and what's what. And we will be ageless, diseaseless, and deathless, and loving and lovable and lovely.
And we'll love each other because we'll know each other as we are.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah, we'll quote that later. And we will, definitely know that. So thank you. And so it'll just be from glory unto glory. Now, if you're living a horrible life here and you're hating your neighbor and you're doing all kinds of stuff like that, well, yeah, when you pass on, that's not going to change. You're going to have to, that will be your probation till you get over those things. If you've been indulging in the carnal mind.
You have the same neighbors?
You probably will. The same neighbors that were bugging you and bugging you. There they are right there again. Until you love your enemies.
Well, and the reason is your neighbors are in your consciousness.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Whatever's in your consciousness is going to still be there until you improve your consciousness.
Sounds like Groundhog Day.
It is very much Groundhog Day. For any of you who watched that movie, he kept going over and over the same old problems until he finally realized that he had to love. That was his problem, was love.
And Mrs. Eddy says there will be death in the next plane of existence, just as there is here, if you don't overcome the belief in death.
She also says that a good man's heaven would be hell to
A sinner, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's why you have to grow out of your false beliefs. And it's most important that we do, all of us. So remember that, and we'll all be happy.
Well, we're here to help each other do that.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for all the help I get.
That's right. In an article that Carrie sent called "The Last Enemy That Shall Be Destroyed Is Death" by a Mary Easton, she writes, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. Thank God for that final verdict. We Christian scientists, enlisted for the destruction of sin, disease, and death, give sincere thanks that the day is nearer than when the apostle made this momentous statement, whereby we learn that death is not God, it is not a friend, it is not irrevocable, it is an enemy, and it is to be destroyed." What's irrevocable?
Can't turn it around or can't stop it.
Right. It's not that.
It can be stopped.
It can be stopped.
Be revoked.
And you often hear, it's a blessing that someone passed on, or it must have been the will of God for this child to die. No. No, that is not what we say. That is not Christian science. And we must know this and be firm in it. Every once in a while, I'll hear someone say something like that. It's not Christian science. Just because your Christian neighbors say it, don't you repeat it, because that's not true.
It is not God's will.
Never.
This may be the side, but error is one of his major tools is discouragement. I mean, God gives everything to work out something until we're just too discouraged to take the next step. But we should, and we'll eventually have the victory.
Yeah, because discouragement will cause you to compromise with the error and accept it, right?
And that we must never do.
There's a watching point that we've had years ago about the enemy just keeps coming, just trying to wear you down.
Mm-hmm.
It's a new enemy every time. Just don't get fooled by it.
Yeah, the falling leaves. That's right. They're always a fresh batch of leaves you're raking. And that's why we can't, people will tend to put off their problems. Oh, I'll wait till I die or, whatever. I don't know what they think. Now is the accepted time. I can't emphasize that enough. The new birth going on hourly. Now we face these problems.
You don't want to look out and see 20 feet of leaves.
No.
That's it. So the responsive reading, there's some interesting things. And in this mountain shall the Lord of hosts make unto all people a feast of fat things, a feast of wines on the leaves, of fat things full of marrow, of wines on the leaves, well refined. Now, what does that mean?
I think it's the purity, because the leaves are the dregs. So if they're refined, and we are refined through Christ.
Thank you. Well, yeah, the wine.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I kind of was wondering what the leaves were, and I looked it up, and it was like the dregs. But then I went over, I looked up on the commentary, and he was going to make a feast of fat things, and wine on the leaves well refined means that when you put the wine in a cask, the stuff it's the sediment on the bottom, but it also has all the color and some flavoring in there, and over time it ripens the wine with better color and flavor, and the leaves still stay on the bottom, separate from the actual wine. So it's actually a good thing.
Yes, it's saying God is giving us the very, very best, the best of the wine. I'm sorry, Carrie had sent me an article about this, and I can't seem to find it. But anyway, it was a Spurgeon one, but I remember what it said. It's God is giving you the very best of food, what's the word?
Well, what is wine? Mrs. Eddy gives us a definition of it, doesn't she?
Inspiration.
Inspiration. Yes. God turns our experiences into the finest, most refined inspiration. Mrs. Eddy says progress is born of experience. This is what God gives us.
The very best of all things. And yes, and he will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations. So, what does that mean?
Well, veil keeps you through.
Go ahead, Linda.
I feel like that just coming here to Plainfield, I learned these different truths and the correct teaching of Christian Science. There was like a veil lifted from my thinking. I could see things I didn't see before, and see the truth in that Mrs. Eddy wrote in this, especially prose works. It was really amazing. All of a sudden, like a light came, and you understood better. And to me, it's like breaking that mesmerism and that veil, sort of like that idea that you have been fed all these lies and believe them, and that's being broken and lifted so you can see the truth, I feel like.
Thank you very much. Who else was speaking?
Well, I was just going to pretty much what she said, but I was just going to say that the veil, as I understand it, is the false sense of being born into matter, that we're not spiritual, but the veil is that have got a selfhood apart from God. And once we realize that our selfhood is the selfhood that is God expressed, that lifts all the false beliefs that go along with the belief that we're mortals rather than immortals.
Yes, right. And all of this, the idea of dying and all of that, this is the veil. We've been taught this in the mortal mind education, and it would cast a veil. And then your eyes are open to know these are lies. They are not true.
It's all in Christian Science that this is taught, because all the other religions, like you were saying, they promote like, to die is good because then you go to heaven and you go to a better place and so forth. Christian Science is teaching that no, that's not true. I know that I had to grapple with that. I mean, because it's a constant indoctrination from other religions that said, well, you're immortal and you have this many years to live and then you die. And if you're good or if you were bad, it will depend what your next life is going to be like. And finding Christian Science, it's like, yeah, the veil is lifted because you see another better view of what your life is going to be like, not this sorrow and dragging and so yeah.
Okay, Zeri, wait 1 second. We'll put you on speaker.
Okay, there you go. Finally getting quicker.
Okay. Two thoughts came to me. Is that we can, the whole feeling that you cannot put old new wine in old vessels, and so we cannot live with this belief of death as being our vessel. So we have to overcome. So this is what I faced this several times, and when I know that there is one mind taking care of me, that all of the gifts that God has given me, all this gratitude comes, and I cannot give into this belief of aging and dying or disease or whatever. And it's because, I was talking to some people who were celebrating the Easter, and they were saying, oh, was it the death of Jesus? And I said, no, it's about birth. We should stop talking about death. We should only see birth.
Yes, we see the resurrection. Ours is the risen Christ overcoming all those beliefs. And it's wonderful. Thank you, Zeri.
Yeah, and that's us being the new man, waking up to the new man or the new woman, and not being in this human confinement or belief of confinement.
Yes.
Right, and that new birth is God destroying the veil.
Yeah.
In other words, God is truth, and God is all. So truth is imperative. It's always working in us, at us, with us, and it's not only truth, but it's giving us the ability to know the truth.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, it's not something separate from us that we can't understand. And where these false beliefs are educated, aren't they?
They are. They definitely are, and really educated, yeah.
Because young children get the truth quickly. It's normal and natural in all of it. It's just the false education that sort of puts the veil in our thought that keeps us from accepting what is normal and natural. And that's why we have tests. That's why that's why our life here is not as harmonious as it could be. Well, but there's hope. But that's why there's always hope,
Mm-hmm.
because the truth is there.
Yes, yes. The truth,
Mhm.
the love, and the life. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeri.
The veil is, I looked at it when it said the covering cast over all people, and I thought, oh, it's like a fishing net, capturing people's thought and keeping them separated from God. When you get rid of that veil or net, then you can't be separated from God, because you can't be, without that veil or keeping you away from God, or at least you think you are. You understand God much better in your relationship. And that whole fishing net thing kind of was a interesting thought for me. I'd never thought of that before.
Yeah, thank you. And it's always this awakening process, casting off the darkness, awakening to this truth. It's always been here. McClellan says that a veil hinders men from knowing God. You cannot see the light. Sin veils God from men's sight. And then he says, we imagine to forget him leaves us undisturbed in following aims disapproved by him in an effort to secure that false peace by fierce absorption in other pursuits. What unconscious self-murder that is. Don't you see that? People just pursuing things, whatever things it is. It can be a job. I mean, none of these things are bad in themselves, but if you're doing it to shut out God and all the amusements of the world, if you're just keeping yourself busy to shut out God and the things of God, then it is bad, and it is self-murder, because eventually you'll see what you've done, and your life will be, your human destiny will not be a good one.
You're making those things God.
You are.
Yeah,
Right, exactly.
God.
Taking them seriously.
Yes. And I did find what Spurgeon said about the lees and the wine, and one of it is, quote, let me now bring before you goblets of wine, wines on the lees, well refined, end quote. These we shall consider as symbolizing the joys of the gospel. What are these? I can only speak of those which I have myself been permitted to sip. One of the dearest joys of the Christian life is a sense of perfect peace with God. Oh, I tell you, when one is quiet for a while and the din and the noise of business is out of one's ears, it is the most delicious thing in the whole world to meditate upon God and to feel He is no enemy to me and I am no enemy to Him. So we have many wonderful lees that God has given us in all different ways. And as Gary said, as inspiration, definitely. So I want to make sure we got to a few things. And one, Pilar asked the question, what about the second death on the forum?
Yeah.
Okay. And a few of you answered. Louise gave a whole list of quotes, good quotes. Jasmine wrote some things about death. But I particularly like Jeremy's. If I were to answer it, I would have answered it in that way. So go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, well, I just read In Unity of Good. Those who reach this transition called death, without having rightly improved the lessons of this primary school of mortal existence, and still believe in matters, reality, pleasure, and pain, are not ready to understand immortality. Hence they awake only to another sphere of experience. It must pass through another probationary state before it can truly be said of them, blessed are the dead which die in the Lord, end quote. And I was really praying and pondering about Pilar's question. After reading a few things from Mrs. Eddy, including that, realized it does us no good to try to uncover what, a human imagination will say about the illusion. And it's just better to learn what we can here and now and really take this time. So I don't know, I was so glad about it because I got this really full joy thinking about that. We're here. there's just no reason to get into it.
Yes, we're on the road to eternal life. Let us investigate life. Let us meet and master the sins or sicknesses that come up in our daily life, and we are conquering this belief of death. And to imagine or try to figure out what is to be or what is to happen. To me, what Mrs. Eddy said is the gospel. Study unity of good. I can't say this enough. To study science and health, study prose works. All your questions are answered there. They truly are. Louise wrote too, and this was unity of good. In divine science, the dying, if they die in the Lord, awake from a sense of death to a sense of life in Christ, with a knowledge of truth and love beyond what they possessed before, because their lives have grown so far toward the stature and manhood of the manhood in Christ Jesus that they are ready for a spiritual transfiguration through their affections and understanding. That's what I was saying. You know, as you've gone through this, what does Mrs. Eddy call this? Is a school, right?
Yeah.
School.
Yeah.
Christ is the headmaster,
Yes.
leading us to Christ.
So this is a educational period for us, and as we learn these things, we're ready and riper for greater lessons, and it will be a wonderful experience. Why wouldn't it? Because we have a good God. But as I said, if you're sinning and maybe you have some things to learn, then so be it. You'll learn them there. So please, let's learn them here. Why not? And then read the other quote, Jeremy.
Oh, from the Red Book. Keep the joy of Christian Science and a well-grounded hope in your success. Remember, as truth progresses, error grows more subtle and aggressive, but it does not become something. It always remains an illusion and is always met and destroyed with the understanding that divine love is the only power. Stand guard against the effort of evil to cause things to happen that will fill you with grief, wrath, or fear, and thus shut out your sense of the allness of God.
Thank you. That is what we do daily. You stand guard against the effort of evil to cause things to happen that will fill you with grief, wrath, or fear. And so suddenly, all of a sudden, now you don't believe God is all. Now you don't believe that you believe something else has a power other than God. That's what we stand quarter at the door of thought.
And I love that it says a well-grounded hope.
Yes.
Just like
Pie in the sky.
talking about God is all and God is love, and but not practically applying it in your life.
Thank you. Very, very true. I think I'll have Gary read this now. This is I don't know. It's actually was sort of a letter. Yeah. It's called "There Is No Death." Most of you know that we received the Eustace Foundation when it. Go ahead.
Yeah, Eustace established a trust to distribute his book and make it available in libraries and so forth. And for several years, he, after his passing, there were trustees that continued to do that, but they disbanded the trust a few years ago, and they asked us to carry it on. So they sent us all of his books, several hundred of them, and all of the files of the trust, all of the history, some of which was very fascinating, letters and so forth to and from Herbert Eustace. And so we are carrying on the Herbert Eustace Trust. And we have reprinted his book and will continue to make it available because it is so good. And he was one of the trustees of the Publishing Society established by Mrs. Eddy to be in charge of all of the publishing, which was separate, as most of you know, from the church in Boston until the litigation of 1918, where the directors stole the trust from the trustees in violation of Mrs. Eddy's trust. But he was one of the trustees at the time of the litigation. And so he defended what Mrs. Eddy established And when the directors took over the trust, he was excommunicated, along with all of the other trustees and with all of the members of the church who supported what Mrs. Eddy established. They were all excommunicated as well. So anyway, Herbert Eustace is a good guy.
And everyone really should have his book. And he explains his whole, in the very beginning of the book. He will tell you everything that went on in a very readable way. And so we received all these boxes of things, sort of personal items and letters, most of which, those of us who poured over them, they've all been published for the most part. But there was just this one that was so interesting, and I believe it was written by his secretary, Mildred Bean. And this I've never seen anywhere. And maybe because to some people it seems radical, but I often give it to someone when someone they know have passed on, because I think it's very beautiful. And so, there is no death. A letter sent to Herbert Eustace from one of his students.
Shortly before the passing of my husband, I had a strange but precious experience I would like to relate. I had gone out and was driving my car when, without any apparent reason, I made a complete U-turn in the middle of a block and returned home. I rushed in the door, and there I found my husband sitting in his chair, lifeless. I mentally uttered the statement, "Dear God, what should I do now?" I looked through the doorway out into the garden, and as I did so, I was reminded of the statement, "There is no death." I noticed then my husband's eyelashes began to move. He sat up, and I helped him into the kitchen. I prepared him some lunch, and when we sat down, he put his hand on mine and said, "Dear, do you know what happened?" Of course, I was speechless, because I knew something tremendous was going on. Then he said, "There is no death, and I have proven it by coming back and telling you so." He told me when he realized he had made the change, his one thought was, "I must go back and tell you what has happened." Then he said, "When you came in and found me on the chair, you said, 'God, what shall I do now?' I tried to tell you, 'Here I am,' but you looked right through me. And then I knew the only way I could prove this to you was by sitting back in my chair." He continued by saying, "This I cannot do again because I must go and not come again." I asked him, "Will you see your friend D?" He said, "She never left you." And I asked again, "Will you see your mother?" And he replied, "I have already talked with her." Then he tried to tell me how wonderful it was, but I could not understand. He asked me to promise him two things. One was, "Do not grieve, because there is no separation." And the other, "Do not be offended by anyone, for they do not know you as you really are. If they did, they would love you." He ate the lunch I had prepared for him, and shortly after that quietly finished his course. I found his body in the bathroom, but knew even before I found him that he was gone. I have never doubted his ascension. I have never been to the grave or even sent a flower there.
So isn't that beautiful?
Yes.
And we know it's true because of the way it makes you feel. I mean, I know that's true.
And similar things have happened to other people, some of which has been written down, many of which may never have been written down. Not everybody has the courage to describe openly an experience like that.
So it's very, very true, very comforting. But again, I'm sure this man had lived the best life he could. So when he went on, it was It was a reward. If you have not, then it won't be. And if you are maliciously doing malicious things, then there is a hell for those people. And it can start here on this earth. Usually it does. So it's kind of up to you. And that must be known as well, because I know, Christian Scientists don't want to hear anything unpleasant and nothing. No. And if anything unpleasant is spoken, usually the next remark is God is love and there's no such thing as that, which is ultimately true. But
prove it.
But prove it, please. Yes, I will sit back and watch you prove it. And if you don't know what we're dealing with, and we don't know what we're handling, you can't faint over unpleasant things. I know, because I used to do this. I didn't want to hear it. And you know why I didn't want to hear it? Because I was afraid of it. That's why. So when people do that, I know, oops, they're afraid. They just want to say those soothing words, just like taking a syrup or a drug.
We don't realize that they're not alone. We have our unity, but we also have a always loving God, inseparable. And so there's nothing that we should feel inadequate about. He'll give it to whatever you need.
Well,
Yes.
That's the point. Thank you, Craig.
And if it's not uncovered and seen, it can't be destroyed. It operates in secret. So some of these things must be brought out. That's why Andrew Hartsook's banner, what he does is great, to uncover these things so they may be seen and destroyed. It's only when you believe in their reality, you don't want to hear it, and you just want to say, God is love, everything's wonderful. You're not being a Christian Scientist because you're not talking about God is love. God is love. But even
And
Mrs.
love is principle.
Yes. And Mrs. Eddy said, I acknowledge your claims. I denounce your power. And we do denounce its power. And we can stand before it and say, it didn't come from God, you've got no power. And then prove its nothingness. And then we get the traction and we gain in the power and the authority of Christ. Otherwise, we're just weak, willy little things mumbling in the corner, God is love.
And getting shot full of holes.
Yeah. So, what?
I just was remembering the other day, Benjamin's son Stephen, he's probably 3 years old. He came up and Gary was there as well, and suddenly he just covered his eyes like he was invisible.
Oh.
You know? So I was just thinking that, like, I'm not going to explode. I'm just God is love, but I'm just covering my eyes.
Right. Well, that's saying, I see no evil, hear no evil, whatever. Well, we're speak no evil, right? And I tell you, when I came here and I met Mrs. Evans and I saw the way she operated, I was totally shocked. I could not believe it. I couldn't believe it. But she was right. And I was a weak, miserable little person. So who was I to question what she was doing? Because she did speak with the authority of Christ. And she was able to stand before the BOD and gather a group of people around her. Because one stick you can break and a bunch you cannot. And all those years of handling animal magnetism, this is what we give to you today because we know it. We have proven it, and we will continue to prove it. And it's only proven in the way that this is being instructed today, because I haven't seen it proven anywhere else. Not like this. So.
And if you like the results, that you shouldn't question the method.
Well, that's true. And we do know, because you see, they suppressed all the information that showed that Mrs. Eddy was a terror to error. She was. And you do read it in these other books, but otherwise, oh, no, we don't. She was a little white-haired lady who was very loving. And she was a very loving. She never grew old. She was very, very loving, but with that principle and with that fire and with that authority of Christ. Now, there are a few other things that were questions, and one was the ending with Revelation and Revelation 20. And Carrie sent me some really good things that I'm just going to read from, which explains what was going on there. The first is from Reverend Kratzer, what he says about Revelation 21-6. And I saw that Christ's mind is able to uncover the most hidden depths of error, nothingness, and clothed with power were reduced to subjection primeval error, which is spoken of as a dragon, an old serpent, the devil, and Satan, and will hold it in subjection for a long but indefinite period, and will keep it in activity till the end of this period. And after that, error will become active again for a short time. And then, all men on earth, having become highly spiritual, now demonstrate the resurrection of the saintly among the so-called dead, and they join in living harmoniously on earth with the truth in consciousness. And I saw that authority and power will be given to those who were beheaded for exercising the spirit of prophecy and for loyalty to the word of God, who had not given either inward or outward allegiance to worldly government when it conflicted with God's government, and who had not worshipped the false sense of God. And I saw that these will live and reign on earth with Christ, or truth, in consciousness during the millennial period. For these will be the first to be raised from the dead, but the remainder of the dead will not be raised until after the millennial period is finished. Blessed and holy are those who will be raised up first. They are so pure that the final destruction of evil will not affect them at all, but they will reign as priests of God and his Christ during the 1,000 years. So to me, that's saying that the martyrs, those people who have given their life to the cause of this, who had not gone into worldly government, who had stayed true and were martyred. We certainly see this in some of the movies we've watched, and we hear about it in present day. Anyway, we will know that they will be raised up to greater glory. And so there's nothing to feel bad about. And then, this is from the Repaid Pages, the Red Book, Mrs. Eddy speaking, and Revelation 20, verses 1 and 2. Science and health is the angel sent down from heaven. Malicious animal magnetism is the bottomless pit. And science and health gives us the key to it. It unlocks the mystery of ages, and its declaration of truth are the chain which binds that old serpent, the devil, for 1,000 years. That is, reduces sin, sickness, and death to a unit of nothingness. Science and health is what's going to do it. This is why we study it. Please study it. Then verse 3. Unity of good is the seal that was put upon the devil and Satan, for its teachings make it impossible for him to longer deceive the nations. Unity of good. That's what we just read from. If you don't know this, study it. And if you think you don't understand it, study it some more. And keep working at it and keep trying to live it, and you will understand it. Verses 4 and 6. They who have been taught of science and health, the heavenly messenger, are they who sit upon thrones and have judgment given unto them, for they declare the science of being over all error, and their judgment is the judgment of God. Then the good that is the reflection of God is separated from the good that is only a false belief or error, which has upon it the mark of the beast. Then the true reflection of God good reigns with those who sit upon the thrones, overcoming the unit of error. They who are thus taught reign with the Christ, whose second appearance is the first resurrection. She's telling us here what's going to solve all the problems is what she has written. And how foolish we are if we don't know these books and study these books. Science and Health and prose works. Unity of Good. Get them so you know the answers to your questions. And we will overcome this belief of a red dragon, a bottomless pit, all of this. And if we don't do it, who will? And when will it be done? This is why what we are now, what we're doing now, our lives now are so important. We have nothing more to wish for, or to hope for. We have today to work out the problem of being. And so help us, God, we will. Now we will conclude with its unity of good. Unity of good, which answers it all very well.
Just this.
No. Let's see what I did. Let's see. You start here and then follow the arrows. Okay, thank you.
Unity of good, page 41. Resurrection from the dead, that is, from the belief in death, must come to all sooner or later. And they who have part in this resurrection are they upon whom the second death has no power. The sweet and sacred sense of the permanence of man's unity with his Maker can illumine our present being with the continual presence and power of good, opening wide the portal from death unto life. And when this life shall appear, we shall be like him, and we shall go to the Father, not through death, but through life, not through error, but through truth. Man in science is as perfect and immortal now as when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Because of these profound reasons, I urge Christians to have more faith in living than in dying. I exhort them to accept Christ's promise and unite the influence of their own thoughts with the power of his teachings in the science of being. This will interpret the divine power to human capacity and enable us to apprehend or lay hold upon that for which, as Paul says in the 3rd chapter of Philippians, we are also apprehended of or grasped by Christ Jesus, the ever-present life which knows no death, the omnipresent Spirit which knows no matter. Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.